Welcome back to Code in Pink. I'm Nia Lucy, and this is episode 3 of Before the Code. So if you've made it this far, hopefully you've realized that for one, on Wednesdays we code pink. That is a Mean Girls reference. I'm always afraid that nobody's gonna get that.
We want to invite you to have lunch with us every day for the rest of the week.
Oh, it's okay. Coolness. So we'll see you tomorrow.
On Wednesdays, we wear pink.
And for 2, hopefully that means that you've already seen episodes 1 and 2, because from this point, everything is just building off of each other, and a lot of times I'm going to reference things from the previous episodes. So today we are going to be talking about data type, and that is another very important part of programming, because if you don't have data types, then you don't have nothing. Literally, you don't have nothing. So we are going to be talking about data types. We're going to dive into the different types of data type, and we're going to give some examples on how you can use them and why we use them. So I know this is a coding video. Y'all are not used to watching coding videos where, for one, it's a sister, but baby, I am a sister and I love to help a sister out. So if you're watching this and you want to know where I got this beautiful hair from, I'm going to put the Instagram right here. She is all about affordable units. So hey best friend, so let's get into this video. So if you've been tuned in to the previous videos, we've already established the fact that a program is basically just a series of instructions that we use to tell the computer what we want it to do. So in order to carry out these instructions, we often rely on a variety of different values. That can be numbers, that can be letters, that can be anything. So for an example, if we were using some of the examples in the previous videos, in episode 2, we compared 2 values, X and Y. With those 2 values, depending on which one was greater depended on which message printed out. So not only are we comparing 2 values, X and Y, but the message that's being printed out can be viewed as a value as well. Then we might have our basic numerical operations. If we have 2 plus 2 equals 4, 2 and 2 are values, and then the total 4 is a value. So in order to use these values, we need to declare what type of values they are in the program, because by declaring what type of values they are, it basically tells us what we can and can't do with the values. So the way I like to look at it is that values are data. So by saying that I need to explain what type of value it is, I'm basically saying I need to explain what type of data it is. So that's the way you can look at the word data type. You're just saying what type of data it is, the data type. And depending on what type of data type it is, depends on what we're able to do with the data type in the program. And we honestly can look at this like we look at things in the real world. I mean, you can't use a letter like you use a number, and you can't use a number like you use a letter. If I gave you 2 statements and I said blank plus 2 equals 4, and then I gave you a statement that said I love D blank G. Let's say I give you 2 anonymous values and you have to match the value that you think belongs in the statement. So let me just go ahead and give you a hint. So even though I'm not going to tell you exactly what the value is, I'm going to tell you the type of value it is. The first value is a numerical value, and the second value is a letter of some sort. Now I'm not going to tell you what kind of letter it is, but I'm going to tell you it's a letter. Now let's look at our 2 statements again and try to place which anonymous value we think belongs in the right place. So the first statement is blank plus 2 equals 4. Well, clearly if we put any letter, it doesn't matter what any letter it is, in the blank, it's not going to make sense. You can't have A plus 2 equals 4. You can't have B plus 2 equals 4. But you can have a numerical value. Hopefully 2 plus 2 equals 4 for you. And then for the second statement, it would be kind of weird if you had D2G. I like D2G. I don't really know what that means. But if we put a letter there, then it would make more sense. DOG. The answer is 0 and 2. But the point is, you already knew the type of value it was, so you knew what you were able to do with it. If I would have just told you there are 2 values, anonymous values, and I didn't tell you there were a letter or a number, you wouldn't know where to place which. But by telling you what type of value it was, you were able to have process of elimination and know exactly what to do with it. It's the same way with programming. In order to allow the program to work as effectively and efficiently as possible, it requires requires us to tell us the type of data that we're giving it so it knows what to do with that data. So now let's go over the data types that you will probably see the most when programming. The first data type is text, or what we like to call string in programming. The reason why it's called string is basically because it's just thought of as a string of individual characters. It could literally be words, it could be numbers, it could really be anything. But when we're referring to numbers and strings, we're not referring to the numbers that you want to add and subtract and multiply. Anything that you would use for a mathematical operation, we're not really referring to. We're referring to those number values that don't really have anything to do with mathematical operations. So for example, your phone number or your zip code or your student ID number or your credit card number or even your social security number. These are all examples of numbers that you really wouldn't think of using mathematically, but they're still important numbers. When we print statements and sentences and names and hello girl, all of those things are strings as well because they're words. So the next data type we're going to talk about is numbers. And unlike strings, these numerical values are actually used for your mathematical operations. So with numbers, as you can imagine, there are a variety of things that you use numbers for in the daily, everyday world. So there are two types of number data type categories. You have your decimal and your whole numbers. Whole numbers or integers are used for things that you do not need a decimal place for. Let's say you have a program that does any type of counting, whether it's counting how many customers come into a store, counting how many items go on a grocery list or how many items get rung up for a grocery list. All of these things you need exact numbers, so you're going to use int. Now let's say we have something that calculates the change or the tax for something or takes in measurements and does calculations for that. For that, you're going to use something like a double or a float. These are the data types that allow you to have decimal places. Next, we have our binary data type. So this is basically all true false. And you will use this type of data type when you're talking about anything that has a yes or a no, a true or a false, a off or a on, a 1 or a 0. Those are the type of things that you use with the binary data type. So a common example used for this is when you're simply logging on to your email or Instagram or anything. If you guess the right password, there's something in that program that's running that system that's saying, yes, they entered the right data, so we're going to continue to move on and let them in. But if you enter the wrong password, it's something in that program that says, no, let's loop them around again and tell them to try again because something was not right in the characters they entered as the password. It's really like a yes or no thing. Yes, they entered it right, or no, they didn't. Next, we have our collection data type. And this basically covers lists, sets, and arrays. With lists, sets, and arrays, with lists, sets, and arrays, we basically can store a series of similar information into one place. So for example, a class roster. We can make a list that is full of every single student's name in a class, and the type of list that will be in a list full of strings. So that's something we also have to declare, the fact that there are a list of strings. But regardless, you have your list and it has its own data type, but the list as a whole is a collection data type. You have a list that is full of independent values, but the list as a whole is its own object. So when we talk about data types, another important thing to mention are variables. So variables are very important because it's basically like a reserve space in your program. The great thing about variables when programming is that you're not necessarily required to initialize a value into that variable. When I say initialize, I mean assign. You're not necessarily required to assign a value to that variable in the very beginning. If you know that variable is going to be used in some point in your program, in the beginning you can literally just declare the variable and give it like a blank value, because in programs we move down in the program.
It don't go down.
Robert, it goes down.
No, it don't.
It do go down.
Oh!
So if I literally set a integer variable x equal to 0 and I move down in my program and then I declare that x is equal to 1, whatever the last initialization was is what the variable is going to be. So I can literally change my variable 20 times throughout my program, but as it's running,
she's a runner, she's a track star,
then the 20th value is what the variable will be equal to. Sometimes you just don't know what the variable is going to end up being, and sometimes you know from the get-go. So for example, if I was trying to find the hypotenuse of a triangle through a program, I don't know why I chose that example out of all examples, but let's just use it. So if I already know the lengths of the sides that I'm using for A and B, I can go ahead and assign A equals this value, B equals this value, and then at the bottom put that C equals the square root of A squared plus B squared, and I could be on my merry way because I got what I needed. However, let's say that we wanted to make a hypotenuse calculator where people could come on and enter their A's and their B's and it would generate the hypotenuse, but we wanted to make sure that you can go back and enter new values as you wish. We would need a way where the user could enter the A and the B, meaning we don't know what the user is gonna enter, so we can't assume a value and assign it in the beginning. So the best way to do this is to assign A and B blank values. So you could either make it 0 or you could just put it a semicolon, because remember we said semicolons in statements. So further down in the program, when we ask the user for his input, we'll simply send a message saying, what is your A? And then whatever they type in for that A, we're automatically going to assign their input to the value A. And the same for value B. We're going to assign their input to value B. And then we make C equal to the square root of their A and their B. And that way we continuously generate hypotenuse, I don't know. We can generate multiple hypotenuses that are not the same, even without us knowing what the user is going to input. So let's say that you run an online store and you wanted to give a custom message to everyone who bought something from you. So be in mind, there are plenty of ways to do this. Some are easier than the way that I'm about to give you, but because this is what we're going over, this is the way that I'm going to give the example, because I don't want nobody in the comments saying,
no, you could have just said this.
I know, but we're using this way because this is what we're going over today. So let's say that you just want the message to say, hey, customer's name, thank you for shopping with us today. In this example, I'm actually going to use 2 different string variables just for the sake of this example. So the first string variable that we want is the customer's name. And in order to get the customer's name, like with the last example, we need to ask the customer their name. So at the top, we're going to go ahead and make a variable, and we're going to call it string, which is the data type, and then we're going to name the variable name. So we can put string name semicolon. That works. Another variable that I'm going to go ahead and declare is a message variable, and the message variable is going to say, thank you for shopping with us today, exclamation point, to make it extra nice. So with that being said, let's go ahead and declare a string variable, and I'm going to name the string variable message. We're going to set that equal to thank you for shopping with us today, exclamation point. So now let's move down in our program, well, our kind of program, because we're not really programming, but now let's move down in our program and we're going to say, hi, what's your name? And then we're going to prompt the user to enter their name. When the user enters their name, we're going to automatically assign that value to our string variable name. So bear in mind, this is not a full programming lesson. This is simply for the example of showing you how variables can work. So then we're going to say, hey, and we're going to insert the variable name, and then we're going to insert the variable message. That way, the printed out value should be, hey, the person's name, thank you for shopping with us today. Now, was the variable for message totally necessary? Probably not, but like I said, I'm doing this just for example purposes. So now let's run our imaginary, not really program, but program. So this is how the program will run. First, it's gonna prompt the user to enter their name. We're going to enter her name. So for this example, I don't know, let's just call her Naya. seems like a great name to me. I'm just saying. So then automatically in the program, it's going to assign Naya to the name variable, and then it's going to print, "Hi Naya, thank you for shopping with us today!" exclamation point. And that is how variables work. Another type of variable that is commonly used is a constant. A constant is a variable that cannot be changed. We just mentioned how moving down in the program, our variables can literally change 20 times if we wanted it to. Whatever the last initialization was in the program is what the variable is going to be. With constant, we're keeping the value of the variable constant. So it's very important that with constant, we know what we want the value to be and we keep it that way. So we only want to assign values to constants that are going to be constant. So I know for me, one of the examples that I think of is the time that I had to program a vending machine, and I use constants when I program the values for the change or for the coins. So if it was a quarter is always going to be 25 cents. A dime is always going to be 10 cents. A penny is always going to be 1. A nickel is always going to be 5. Those are things that simply will not change. So when programming and having to decipher which coins were being dispensed for change, the values of the coins never change. So I program them as constants. Another example is when you use pi, 3.14. Pi is pi is pi is pi. Pi will always be pi. So you can literally initialize pi as a constant in your program because it's always going to be pi. And there are plenty more examples I'm sure you can think of a program that has a value in it that is never going to change. But those are just 2 easy examples for you to think about. That being said, this is a wrap for episode 3 of Before the Code. And I really hope that you all were able to really understand what was going on, what I was talking about. So if you made it to the end of this video, I want you to drop a lemon emoji. Please be sure to follow Code in Pink on Instagram. That's CODENPINK. Also, be sure to subscribe and like this video and tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend that if they want some coding basics, they can come here. So once again, I do appreciate the subscribers that I have thus far. So thank you all. Next week, we will be back with episode 4. And remember that on Wednesday, we code pink. So love you guys and peace out.